given all its history.
Yeah.
So for this deep dive, we're getting right to it. What kind of global power does Germany actually have right now? We've gone through a ton of research to bring you the clearest picture of its economy, its political clout, and all the changes happening in its military. What we really want to know is Germany one of the big players on the world stage today? And as I'm sure you know, it's not all about military strength these days.
No, not at all. It's
way more complex.
Exactly. The world that Germany is operating in now is fundamentally different.
Yeah.
Take, for example, the BRICS nations. That's Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa.
Right.
Now get this. Their combined economic output, and this is measured by something called purchasing power parity, which takes into account the relative cost of goods and services.
Okay.
Well, that actually overtook the G7 countries. That's, the US, UK, Japan, Germany, and so on back in 2018. And this trend, it's continuing. It's really a sign of a big shift in the global economic pecking order. And you can bet that has major consequences for geopolitics.
Absolutely. And we can't forget about the tension between the US and China either. I mean, remember the trade war?
Oh, yeah.
That was a big deal. And for a country like Germany, which trades a lot with both, you can imagine it's like walking a tightrope, figuring out supply chains, making strategic decisions. It's not easy.
Nope. And on top of that, you have the general instability around the world, the war in Ukraine, tensions in the Middle East, all of that. Yeah. And suddenly the risk of conflict between countries is like a top concern this year.
Yeah.
And that really forces nations to reassess their national security strategies and their alliances.
Yeah. Who are your friends? Who can you rely on?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what's interesting too is that even within Europe itself, we're seeing a rise in more internally focused politics and right-leaning populist movements. And this could naturally affect how willing countries are to cooperate internationally and maybe lead to more self-interested foreign policies.
Yeah. More looking out for number one.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, let's take a closer look at Germany's economy now. I mean, it's still the biggest economy in Europe and the third largest in the whole world as of this year.
Right.
And when it comes to industry within the EU, it's huge. I mean, almost a third of all industrial production in the EU last year came from Germany.
Yeah, that's right. But things aren't quite as rosy as they might seem. The reality is that Germany's economy is actually facing stagnation right now. And forecasts are saying near zero growth next year. There's a genuine worry that if Germany's economy starts to stumble, it could drag the rest of the EU down with it.
When Germany sneezes, Europe catches a cold.
Exactly. And here's another interesting twist. The U.S. has become Germany's top trading partner again in 2024. It's the first time since 2015. And this is partly because car exports to China have decreased. China's facing its own competition within its own borders now.
Yeah.
But trade with Central and Eastern European countries, like Poland, that's becoming increasingly important for Germany.
This is where things get really fascinating, I think, for our listeners. The things that made Germany's economy so strong.
Yeah.
They've kind of changed, haven't they?
They really have. Energy costs are up. The cost of imports has gone up. And then you have all this talk about too much bureaucracy, not enough investment in things like digital infrastructure, and, an aging workforce, which is affecting Germany's ability to compete.
And their famous constitutional debt brake. It was designed to keep things stable, but now some people are saying it might actually be preventing them from investing in
that's a big debate, right?
Crucial areas.
Yeah.
And that brings us to a really key point about the future of Germany's economy. They've made some great progress in renewable energy, right? And that could give them energy independence and even a leading position in the whole green technology sector. But it requires massive investment in infrastructure.
It does.
And it's worth noting that German businesses, well, they're not feeling very optimistic right now about current economic policies. They're predicting another tough year in 2025.
Yeah.
And they actually see those very same economic policies as the biggest threat. Okay, well, let's shift gears a bit and talk about Germany's political influence. I mean, because their economy is so strong, they have a lot of sway within the EU.
Oh, yeah.
Especially because of their contributions to the EU budget.
Right.
Now, there's likely to be a snap election in February 2025, and Friedrich Merz is expected to lead the new government. And there's a lot of hope in the EU that Germany will be a more reliable and unified leader, after some internal disagreements in the previous coalition.
Absolutely. And for the EU to really work effectively on the global stage, Germany's relationships with France and Poland, what's often called the Weimar Triangle, are super important.
Okay.
And then you have the transatlantic alliance with the U.S. through NATO.
Right, NATO.
But if the U.S. starts to take a more transactional approach to foreign policy, which could happen, well, that could push Germany to boost its own defense capabilities and really push for greater European strategic autonomy, the EU being able to act more independently in defense and foreign policy.
So what about the relationship with China? I mean, that's got to be a tough one to navigate for Germany.
It really is. You've got these massive economic ties on the one hand,
right,
but growing concerns about security on the other. They're trying to balance those economic benefits with the need to diversify and be less dependent on China, especially in sensitive sectors.
Makes sense.
And of course, the war in Ukraine has completely reshaped Germany's relationship with Russia. They're now strongly supporting Ukraine and working hard to reduce their dependence on Russian energy.
And Germany is known for its strong commitment to multilateralism, isn't it?
It is. They're a big player at the UN. They're aiming for a seat on the Security Council. They're a major contributor to NATO.
Right.
And they're actively involved in the World Health Organization and climate action efforts, all those global organizations.
Let's talk about Germany's military transformation a bit. They actually hit NATO's 2% defense spending target in 2024 with over 69 billion euros going towards defense. That's a big move.
It is. And we're seeing them purchase a lot of modern equipment, like the Sky Ranger and Arrow 3 missile defense systems.
Okay.
Yeah. But the increased spending comes with a persistent problem. There's a real shortage of personnel in the Bundeswehr. They're trying to recruit more people, but the dropout rate is high and many positions remain vacant.
Oh, I see.
On the other hand, creating a separate military branch dedicated to cyber warfare that shows they're adapting to modern threats. NATO is still the core of Germany's security policy, and they're taking on a bigger role in strengthening NATO's eastern flank.
Right.
They're planning to deploy a brigade to Lithuania, which would be their first permanent forward deployment of its kind.
Wow.
There's even the potential for Germany to lead EU military operations using NATO's resources under the Berlin Plus agreement.
So let's sum all of this up for our listeners. Germany is still a really important economic and political power in Europe, but they're facing some economic headwinds and challenges in staffing their military. And all of this is happening in a pretty complicated global environment.
Yeah, exactly. If we zoom out and look at the bigger picture, Germany becoming a superpower on its own like it was in the past, that's very unlikely in today's world. I mean, you have so many power centers now, and Germany is deeply integrated into the EU.
Right.
But the potential for them to become much more influential globally, that's definitely there.
Absolutely. So the key things for Germany seem to be implementing those economic reforms, strengthening their military, getting the EU more united under their leadership, managing those tricky relationships with powerful countries, continuing to work through global organizations, and even boosting their soft power, you know, their ability to influence through persuasion rather than force. Yes. So here's something for you to think about. What do you think is the biggest obstacle Germany needs to overcome to really increase its standing in the world in the next few years? And what could be the biggest surprise in their story on the global stage?
Yeah, great questions to consider.
It'll be interesting to see what happens.
Definitely.
All right, well, that's all the time we have for this deep dive. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, everyone.